Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. I'd like to tell you about something I saw or heard. It's still hard for me to talk about what I saw and accept what I saw. I'm called Samantha. I'm a biologist who studies Iraq and, in particular, scorpions. When I met the scorpion, I was 23 years old and doing research on the most poisonous scorpion in North America, the Arizona bark scorpion. My meeting took place during the day. There wasn't a single cloud in the sky, and I could see very well. So, even though I'm a scientist, I have to say that there are things out there that science hasn't found yet or won't admit to, like the fact that the bark scorpion hunts at night. We spent most of our days either sleeping because we had been out all night exploring or just relaxing and keeping track of what we did. Let me tell you, it was very hot at this time, and you always felt tired during the day. This was especially true on this day. I was sleeping in my tent when my friend Rosie, who was also on this fieldwork trip, started shouting and hollering from outside. She was yelling at me to get out of the tent and come see what she was looking at. I woke up quickly, but it took me a minute to figure out where I was. I got out of my tent and ran to her to find out what was wrong. She was yelling and pointing up at the sky. "Take a look! Take a look!" When I saw them, my mouth dropped open because, for lack of a better name, they looked like real-life flying dragons. I could tell this wasn't a bat or a bird because the dark green scales sparkled in the sun. This thing was huge, at least 10 to 12 feet long, and maybe even longer. It was about 400 feet above the ground. I thought it was a dark green color and had big wings that reminded me of bat wings. You know that his fingers are long and that the part of his body under the skin is stretched between them. Through the membrane, I could see the sun. It had a long tail and a big head that reminded me of a reptile. Its legs and feet were tucked under its belly. No, it did not end in a triangle shape. It just looked like a reptile's sail. It flapped its wings and flew higher, then took off again. It kept getting higher and higher. At this point, I couldn't decide whether to watch this creature fly or run back to my tent, unpack my camera, and try to take a picture of it, which would take time away from this exciting sighting that I might never have again. I made sure to keep track of everything I could see in my mind. I asked what that thing in hell was. And Rose said it without hesitating or making a joke. "Is that a dragon?" I should have agreed with her right away. The scientist in me said there was no such thing, but the girl who was standing there watching this creature fly up into the sky said Rosie was right. Small black square, we were looking at a dragon. The moment got even more amazing when something else happened. A second one came out of the sky and joined the first one in flying around. Even the height they were at made this one smaller. Now, I could still tell the difference in size. He looked like it was made the same way as the first flying thing we were watching. I can still see the sun coming through the membranes of that one's wings. Now I had no choice but to run for my camera, but by the time I got back, they were too far away for me to take a picture. I was so upset and angry with myself. At first, I could have gotten a fairly accurate picture, but I chose to watch this thing instead. Instead, they flew away, and we tried to follow them with our eyes as best we could. When they started flapping again, they could really move, and then they went so high up that they looked like little dots in the sky. Small black square, they also appeared to not make any sound while they were lower. Small black square, that night we told the local guide that we've been working with a man named Miguel about our encounter, but he said we were crazy and it was obviously a case of mistaken identity. My mind was still trying to think of a way to show that he was wrong. But Rosie seemed to have decided what she thought, and she got very mad at Miguel. I had to drag her away and take her for a walk to cool her down. She was almost crying and kept telling me that she knew what she saw and asking me why I couldn't accept it too. Small black square, believe me, I've never been so torn in my life. Science has been a big part of my life and my beliefs for as long as I can remember, but I also saw what she saw the rest of the time we were together. There was nothing going on. We just kept our attention on the scorpions and did the job. But trust me, I've always had my eyes on the sky. I wanted to look at this thing again to see if it was a dragon or maybe just a case of mistaken identity. I just wanted to take a picture again. We didn't see anything else, though, which was a shame. About a month later, Miguel called us to tell us that our mysterious creature had been seen again. He had apparently been out late one night and heard about a man who said he had seen a dragon. So Miguel found him and asked what he had seen. A farmer in the area said that a big lizard with wings had swooped down and taken one of his goats. The first thing we saw was just like what he said it would be, dark green, covered in scales, with a reptilian head and a long tail. This person thought it was a dragon. He was sure because he couldn't think of anything else it could be. But a dragon big and strong enough to swoop down and grab a full-sized goat with its talons and then fly back up into the air. I think Miguel and I got off the phone even more confused than I was before. I've come to realize that my way of thinking might be wrong. So much so that if something can't be explained, it must not be real. Small black square, now. I am sure that what I saw was at the very least an animal that science hasn't found yet. But I'm getting more and more convinced that it was a real dragon, and that dragons do exist. I'm not saying it breathes fire and steals gold, but I do think it's at least the source of those stories. Could there really be a flying reptile that hasn't been found yet in the Sonoran Desert? Or could it be a dragon? It's clear that it eats meat because it ate that man's goat. I can't wait to hear what other people think about this meeting. This would be the first time I actually shared it so much that it could be put on a site like YouTube. I was hunting coyotes on my father-in-law laws one night when I saw something that changed the way I thought about the woods forever. It was around 6 or 7 p.m. right at dusk. I was in a hunting blind on the edge of a ravine with a view of a creek about 30 feet below and a cornfield right next to it. I was trying to get a few people to come because one of my neighbor's cows had been hurt and we all thought it was because of a coyote. Well, it was getting dark, and I was getting ready to leave when I heard footsteps coming up behind me. I thought it was my father-in-law, so I called out to him in a low voice to let him know I heard him and lowered my crossbow. When I looked out the mesh window, I didn't see him, and I was surprised that he didn't call back. Then I heard something sniffing right behind me, about 3 feet away. I was excited because I thought this must be a coyote that heard the call for help and came in to see what it could eat. I slowly turned around in my chair and lifted my crossbow. Then I heard a growling sound. It was so deep that I could feel it inside me, and it filled me with dread. The deep growl told me that whatever was out there was much bigger than a coyote. I put down the crossbow and grabbed my gun. I always have a sidearm with me. I started praying, and for some reason, I felt like I was in serious danger. At that point, I thought I might have a fight on my hands. I was attacked by a wild dog in the past. I still have scars that remind me of that fight. Then, as I walked away from that tent, I saw something that changed my life for good. It broke this safety bubble I didn't even know I was in, a bubble I had been living in my whole life when it came to hunting and being in the woods. I looked at this thing that looked like a wolf and was walking away on its back legs. From my blind, I could see it moving along the edge of the ravine. When it jumped down into that ravine, I couldn't see it anymore. I didn't even know I was holding my breath until I let it out. Small black square, I was shaking. This thing had to be taller than me, because I'm 5 feet 10 inches. The way it walked made it look smaller than it was when it was standing up straight. I bet it was over 7 feet tall, had dark grey fur, and had a lot of muscle, especially on its back. From the way it walked, hunched over, I couldn't see its head, but I could see the tips of its ears, which looked like they were pointed. It had long arms that looked like they ended in hands instead of claws. I never saw its face, but it did have legs like a dog. I wanted to run out of there as fast as I could, but I felt frozen and shocked because they also wanted to stay still. I wanted to be ready in case this thing came back, so I got my things together, took a deep breath, and then slowly got out of my blind, keeping my gun up and looking around as I walked to my truck. Not running was the hardest thing I had to do. I wanted to run as fast as I could to my truck, which was about 300 yards away, but it was getting dark fast and I didn't want to be out there late with this thing. Finally, after what seemed like forever, I got to my truck and drove as fast as I could, not caring about the speed limit. Since then, I've had a hard time talking about what happened to me, especially with my family. They would think it was a case of mistaken identity or that the shadows were making me see things I didn't see. They know how to get things done. Science is what they believe in, not things that go bump in the night. After doing some research, it's comforting to know that other people have seen similar things. People like you share your stories to show that these things are real and not made up. After that, I did see this thing again. About 2 years after what happened while I was hunting, I moved into an old house about 10 miles from where I saw that thing. My 2-year-old daughter told me for about a week that there was a bad wolf outside. She kept talking about this bad wolf over and over, and I started to worry. I kept thinking about the night I saw that thing. I told her that if she ever saw it again, she should come get me. One night around 8, she came to me and said, "There's a bad wolf outside." I went with her to her room. She told me to look out the window because it's on the 2nd floor. Out there, we have floodlights. We also have a big chicken coop and run about 50 yards back. After that, there is a wood line about 10 yards back. So, I'm looking out the window to see what I can see. And at first, there's nothing. I kept walking back and forth across the yard, looking for this bad wolf she kept talking about. I looked all around the coop, but there was nothing there. I wondered if it might have been my neighbor's dog trying to get to the chickens. But I still didn't see anything. Then, when I looked again at the wood line, I saw this thing. Like before, it was a big wolf-like creature standing on 2 legs and looking right at us. It was standing behind this big cross I made out of wood. About 9 feet high, that cross. This thing wasn't much shorter than that. I was frozen once more. I was also angry, though. This thing showed up at my house. It was on my property, and scared my children. It was on my land, and it was watching my family, my daughter and my son. No one knows how long it had been there. This time, I grabbed my daughter and turned right back to look at this thing. We were trying to see who could look the best. It looked like it had big yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the bright light. I grabbed her and told my son to come. We went to my room, where I tried to keep my cool. I put them both in my bed and went to get my rifle from my gun safe. I went to look out the window. But this thing was no longer there. I didn't get much sleep that night, so I let my kids sleep with me and my wife. I spent most of the night looking out that window. Small black square, I've never seen it again. Small black square, I pray. I never do. Small black square, I live near Circleville, Ohio. We appreciate that you put this story on your YouTube channel. I sent the story to other people and posted about it on Reddit to let people know that these creatures do exist. I wouldn't be surprised if this story has been told to other people before, but the more people who hear it, the better. Like I said, this happened in Ohio. I know there are dogmen in Ohio, especially in Germantown, and I also know there are other hot spots nearby.